So clean language.
Clean language.
What's that about, Judy?
So
I've heard you are a person knowledgeable about this thing.
I'm a person knowledgeable about a particular kind of clean language. Let me just explain which kind of clean language it's not. So the kinds of clean language we're not going to be talking about much this evening include not swearing.
Shame.
Which means you can swear as much as you like. We won't stop you.
Indeed.
Within boundaries.
We don't mean clear language, as in this is not a talk about public speaking or about expressing yourself clearly. This is not a talk about the software development language clean.
I've already learned something new.
There is one, it's on Wikipedia, honestly. And it's not about the NLP thing called clean language. If you don't know what NLP is, don't worry about it. If you do know what NLP is, it's not that. So that's what we're not talking about tonight.
So what are we talking about then, Judy?
So what are we talking about? We're talking about a precision toolkit, a precision inquiry toolkit, devised by a very interesting guy called David Grove, which can do a number of things. And one of the things about it is its flexibility, its plasticity, the number of things you can do with it, which sometimes makes it difficult to define. One of the things I've started saying recently is here are 6 examples of things that you can do with clean language. So you can harvest known information. You can elicit unknown knowns. You can shift emotional states. You can motivate people to change. You can enhance relationships. And you can give and get good feedback.
Wow, that was fast.
Do any of those sound interesting to you?
I want it. I like number 4.
Well, we can't do all these 6 tonight, because what we want to do is give you an experience of clean language, rather than doing a load of talking, where you can listen to stuff online. You'll be able to listen to the recording online and all that kind of thing. There's lots of stuff online about this stuff. What we want to do with this evening is use the fact that we've got ready-made human beings to play with and get you all doing stuff. So that means we can't follow all of these 6 things in a single bound. So we're going to focus on 2, maybe 3. So we're going to focus on 1 stroke 2, and we're going to focus on number 6, getting information. So harvesting known information, eliciting unknown knowns, and giving and getting good feedback. Does that sound reasonable? A reasonable use of just over an hour.
Can we tell you after the hour?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, because one of the things about working with agilists is that you guys do tell us how we can improve, how we can make it better next time. So we'd love to know what you'd like to be different next time. Of course, you're going to come back, because I can see a whole bunch of people in the room who have come back, who've been in a talk of mine before and have thought it's worthwhile to come back. So the guys who've experienced quite a lot of this stuff before, please do chip in. Please do share your experiences, your stories of using this stuff, particularly in work contexts, in agile-ish kind of contexts, because it's those stories that can bring this stuff to life for people, help people really understand how this works, and how some strange bloke from New Zealand who came up with something which existed within psychotherapy, what that can have to do with achieving all these results in a software development team right now. So that's
Do you want me to share the impact it had on me?
Do.
So,
But step into the light if you would.
yes. I wanted to get out of your way. So I stumbled upon, at some point, I discovered Judy's Metaphor Mastery course. and participated, and it has opened my eyes in so many ways. The main thing is that before I had been one of those many agile coaches that had heard and read and repeatedly been told and occasionally told other people that coaching means that you believe that the other person or the company you're working with has all the resources that they need to discover their problems and solve them. Have you heard of that statement? And we all know that they know so well how to develop good software, and they know so well how to organize good teams. And so I was always yeah, sure. And I am the agile expert, right? So I am the one who is coming and telling, etc. And with Clean, I had a method that forced me within a conversation to actually stay out of it so that I could experience again and again that the statement was true. And through that experience, I started believing it. And now I treat people and organizations like that, and it has made me so much more effective. So it basically has taught me what coaching actually is. And that's the single most impactful thing that I've learned in at least 5 years. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Can I share a little tiny story about why I'm here? Because I think it's relevant. Because I was
live here.
I don't live in the basement of LexisNexis.
Good point.
But I do have a history with LexisNexis going back a long old way, because I used to work for Teletext. I used to be a news journalist, and we used to take a data feed from these guys. And I moved from being a senior editor at Teletext to taking what would nowadays be called a product owner role, as we moved Teletext from being on the television to being on the web and on mobile phones and all these kind of things. And we tried and we tried and we tried and we tried and tried to take Teletext onto the new platforms, and we failed. And I lost my job. And about 2 weeks after I finished at Teletext, I came across Clean Language. And I was just, if only we'd known. If I'd had this and been able to share it with the teams, we wouldn't have failed, and I wouldn't have lost the job I loved. So that's why Clean Language hooked me, and it has a direct relevance to being here tonight. I don't think I've shared that with you before, have I?
Not in that level of detail, no. Thank you.
So, does it need saying that I'm Judy, he's Olaf? You can look us up. We don't need to do the
Yes,
who we are thing.
you will find us.
Yeah.
We're easily identifiable and Googleable and whatever. Do you know how listening works? Enlighten us.
You let the other person express themselves.
Good.
If you don't understand something, you repeat it after them and ask. If I understand correctly, that's what you're trying to say.
So repeating what the other person say, is that listening?
Well, it's active listening.
Okay.
Making sure you understand what the other person's trying to say.
This is more about enabling the other person to understand what they are going to say. And the very simple instructions for listening, I learned this from Paul Klipp at a conference a few years ago. The first thing is very obvious. The second thing is equally obvious but very hard. Don't think about talking. So what we invite you to exercise in the first round, so there will be multiple pieces of exercise where you will work in pairs. So the person next to you will be your partner. And next to could mean you need to turn 90 degrees and then find somebody next to you. Or you could get up and find somebody in the room who then becomes somebody next to you. And you'll be listening in the first round for 2 minutes to something that they are sharing. And the aspiration is that you try to not talk and that you try to not think about what they are talking, but try to really just listen. Unless you're somebody who's used to this, specifically when you've been trained, like many of us, in active listening and lots of other coaching things, this will be really, really hard. That's why I'm saying it's an aspiration. Don't feel pressured or tortured or anything. Just try. One thing that you are encouraged to do is use any other means to encourage them to keep talking. So keep eye contact, smile, be open, nod, lean in. Everything is okay that lets them know that you are actually listening. Don't be stonewalling. That's not the point of the exercise. But try not to talk and not to think too much about what you could say next. Give them the space to explore their own thoughts. Any questions about this?
What should the talker talk about?
Something significant, something that has meaning for you. Something that you imagine the other person might like listening to for 2 minutes. 2 minutes can be very long when you're sharing something that's extremely boring. Well, the shift in energy was quite astounding. What was that like? Good. What kind of good?
Interesting.
Interesting. What kind of interesting?
I follow every single word.
Follow everything or every single word. Cool.
Absorbing and difficult.
Absorbing, difficult.
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake.
Short.
Short. Who was different? Long. Quick question. The short and long, was that from the perspective of the person speaking or from the perspective of the listener? Listener? Both. Short, long,
Short listener.
short, listener. Who was different? Both was short? Okay. When it was felt long, was that from a listener and speaker perspective or both? Speaker? Listener.
Less engaging.
Less engaging when you were listening. Okay, less engaging. We give you options to engage in the next round.
More engaging.
More engaging.
I can't communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Because
You can't communicate?
you can communicate because there are interesting things that
Hmm.
the person is saying.
Can't communicate what's interesting.
There is no engagement. You can't listen to someone just talking. Not that I don't want to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I want to listen that both of us contribute.
Yes.
Not just one doctor or another has to say that.
Want both to contribute.
I think it's difficult to be quiet
Yeah.
when the other person is so interested.
Difficult to be quiet.
It was relaxing.
Relaxing.
It took the pressure off having to interact. It's nice, clear,
Yeah.
and simple, I guess.
So what it did do is it gave the speaker a chance to explore more what they were saying, which I found quite interesting.
More chance for exploration.
It's more memorable.
More memorable. Interesting. One more.
I'm not sure I'm going to explain this properly, which I apologise in advance.
Then let me write down the other thing first so I can properly listen.
What I struggled was he had some really interesting themes that I actually wanted to explore,
Mm-hmm.
but because I couldn't provide verbal feedback, it was very hard to say, that's a bit I'm really interested in.
That's an excellent cue into the next two versions of this exercise. One thing that I'm always puzzled by I've opened a lot of workshops just with this bit, because I find that when people talk to each other very quickly in a workshop setting at the beginning of a training or whatever you have, people are coming in, they arrive, they open up, they engage. It has a lot of really, really good impact. And I've never done anything to human beings with such an amount of diversity in the reactions. I've had people come at my throat of like, that was like torture. That's why I'm now giving the instructions like, this is an aspiration, you might not succeed. And the most moving experience was Agile Cambridge a few years ago when I started a session like this, and 1 minute in, I saw a woman started to cry. And we made eye contact, and I was like, do you need help? And she was, no, I'm okay. And she came to me after the session, and she said, Olaf, I just realized after a minute that this was going to be the first time I would be able to finish that story. And I was like, wow, what a gift that can be to people when we just listen. And that's something that I find quite amazing. And we're building on this stance of just providing space for somebody to explore their own thinking. That's what we're doing here.
So, round 2.
Now it becomes difficult, so you need the expert.
Round 2, in some ways it becomes simpler. In some ways it becomes simpler. Hold in mind everything you've learned in the last few minutes as we go into the next bit. So, as well as nodding and smiling and leaning forward and all of this, you've got one extra way of holding the person's attention, encouraging them to keep talking, and to encourage them to talk about something that you are interested in. You've got the option of repeating one or more of their words.
Repeating one or more of their words.
Exactly so. So if they say, it's the first time I've ever had the chance to finish that story, you could say, finish that story? Or you could say, first time? Anything like that. You don't have to repeat back all of their words. That would be ridiculous. You're not.
That would be ridiculous.
But repeat back some of their words and notice what happens.
Notice what happens.
Again, the drill is 2 minutes each way. And again, the drill is in pairs. Now, we've got one additional person in the room, so it's going to get interesting. Either Dan or Olaf, would you be willing to go in?
Sure.
So for the talker, the task is to
Then you take the time.
talk about
And you
something
turn
that
off my
interests
microphone.
you, something important to you for 2 minutes. For the listener, listen, keep quiet, listen, don't talk, don't think about talking, but you can repeat back one or more of the words the other person says. Same pairs, change subject if you need to. So what did you notice? You couldn't talk.
Like channeling the river.
Like channeling the river.
Yes, like taking it down a different path.
What kind of channeling? Taking it down a different path.
Or taking it down, you've got different branches in there, and you take it down a particular path.
Taking it down a particular path when you've got different branches.
For me, the metaphor was similar, like deviating an asteroid. You know, you just touch the bit and then completely different. You don't have to intervene all the time. It's just
Like deviating an asteroid. Just touch the bit. Who's not like that? Who is different to that?
Finding common ground.
Finding common ground.
Yeah.
What kind of common ground?
Traveling and jobs.
Travelling and jobs. So finding common ground. And for you?
I think in the last round I could not really verify what I understand is what he's trying to say. And this time I could progress one step further. Now if I nod and I can repeat that, either you say, continue doing that, which means it verifies that I understand correctly, or say it some different way, which means I didn't understand correctly. So one step in verification.
So one step in the verification.
I just felt like when he said the word, 2 words, I directed that got distracted down the road, but then I had to come back to the conversation.
So you got distracted down his road and then came back to your conversation. Who's different? Like the guy at the back and then Andrew.
You could use one word to expand on the conversation.
So one word would expand on the conversation. What kind of expand?
So he was talking about a festival that was going on in Madrid. And I said Madrid, and then he enlightened me that there's 35,000 people and it was a weekend event. And it was quite interesting just by using the word Madrid. It was like blowing up a balloon. It just like,
So it's like blowing up a balloon, expanding like that,
yeah,
blowing
and
up a balloon.
And then he went back to the original story he was telling. So.
I think it forces depth.
Forces depth.
Because it, to a certain extent, you're challenging that person to consider the words that they've just used. So they start to think about it in a little bit more detail. And therefore they tend to expand on it a little bit more.
Forces depth. And Andrew had something.
I was more distracted by thinking about what should I say and am I distracting the speakers, whereas when I was just listening I felt more kind of focused.
Yeah, so listening, you were more focused. With this, you were more distracted.
And it's contrived.
Contrived.
I think it didn't help me to turn it into a two-way conversation, basically, because I had such a limit in choice of words I could use. It made it impossible for me to convey or to feel like I could convey what I wanted to say.
Made it impossible for you to convey what you wanted to say.
Yeah.
This gentleman here, and then this lady, and then we'll draw this bit to a close.
So when I was speaking, I was repeating the word. Then I feel that he's listening to me, so I could see that she's engaged more. However, when he was speaking, I was struggling to find out what words should I repeat. And whether when I'm repeating it, whether he's going to feel like interrupted. So I was actually struggling to repeat the word. So
So you were struggling to decide,
which word should I repeat?
Which word?
Yeah.
And for you? I found that the tone played a huge role because most of the times it was like a question, but then when it wasn't, it actually impacted in what direction the conversation went.
So the tone, sometimes it was question.
One more. Actually, it helped me a lot in Olaf's torture. So in remembering that, I didn't have to remember it because I knew what I could do. It was that simple thing, repeating something. I didn't think about what I could say or what. It's actually easier from the point of view.
Yeah. So it's easier. So it's quite easy, but some people it's difficult to just listen and don't think about talking, just listen. Some people found that easy, some people found that difficult. Some people found this difficult, some people found it easy, some people took it deep. For some people it was just like diverting an asteroid, just a tiny touch and it would go off in a different direction. Other people it went deeper, other people were much more focused on what was going on for them and that they couldn't say what they wanted to say. And all of that. Are you guys up for one more round? Are you going to brief this round or am I? You don't do it? I'll do the debrief after both.
Okay. So, now we're coming to the actual clean language bit. Clean language is a set of a dozen or 2 dozen questions. In an extensive research project a long, long while ago, Judy discovered that people who have trained clean language for months and are then doing a kind of exercise clean language application thing for hours, that out of these 1 or 2 dozen questions, they mostly use just 2. And these are now labeled the lazy Jedi question because you can be a clean language Jedi with just 2 out of all of the questions. And these questions are, you might have heard that first one because we used it quite a few times in the last 10 minutes. What kind of X is that X? For instance, when you look at all of these beautiful metaphors here, you could ask what kind of river is that river, or what kind of channeling is that channeling, or what kind of contrived is that contrived? It's a really, really good question for foreigners when we when we don't know a word in English. You could just say what kind of, and people give you a translation. And that's also a magic. Who of you works in software? When you ask something like, what kind of transaction is that transaction? And you get, oh, it's the transaction, that kind of transaction which needs to be stored in 2 different systems, and they need to be synchronized, and they can never be out of sync, because otherwise we lose millions a second. You really want to know that kind of information. So it's really, really beautiful for talking to customers and things like that. And especially when you've used that question 1 or 2 times, and you think you've kind of explored what the person is willing to reveal, then you could ask, and is there anything else about that transaction? Or that depth, or the asteroid, or the deviating of the asteroid? And you don't need to use it on metaphors, it's just specifically useful on metaphors, because metaphors are something that stands for something else. And when you ask a question like this, it explores the surface of the subconscious, so to say. So it kind of, that's the access to, where's our beautiful list of benefits?
On the wall over there.
Here. Elicit unknown knowns. So you kind of tap into what the person is not aware of knowing. Make sense? So you can combine these questions with the repeating, or just use each individually.
How do you find out that you are understanding what the person is saying?
That doesn't matter. This is an exercise, so we're training something. And B, the purpose of clean language is that the other person is clarifying their thoughts. And if they know what they're talking about, that's good enough for now. I'm happy if we get to a next level of conversation of how do we get ourselves into the picture. But the main thing that makes clean language clean is that you get your shit out of the conversation. Make sense?
Is that a technical term?
That was too quick.
Is that a technical term?
My brain did not compute the syllabus you said because they were too fast. So could you repeat what you said?
I was asking if that was a technical term.
A technical term. The shit out of the conversation? I think so. especially in certain parts of London. There might be an F word inside as well. And I omitted that because I don't feel qualified as a foreigner. Okay? Good enough to start? 2 minutes each way. Try to get 1 or 2 of those questions in. Don't try to squeeze in lots of them, because that will not only feel awkward, it will block you from actually listening. And there's something that you can do as the person speaking to help the other person have a good exercise experience, and that's breathing. Okay, go. What was different now? Much more engaging.
More of a flow.
More of a flow. What kind of flow?
The bits of the conversation were more joined up, more connected, was more of a story.
More of a story.
It shows that the person is interested in what you are saying.
Yeah.
It encourages the speaker to give more detail.
Encourages more detail.
Use the option, actually, again, without aim of make it flow, to actually zoom in and zoom out, or kind of zoom in,
yeah.
anything else, just open.
We became more direct into maybe collaboration, into business collaboration.
More directing into business collaboration?
Business proposition. Can you translate that?
No, the English was perfect. I'm just
So basically, we took a couple of topics where we started with traveling, and then we became into personal situations, and then we were like, oh, maybe we can cooperate.
Okay.
Cooperation.
of distraction during the conversation.
Yeah.
When you, the bit that Olaf said at the beginning, which was really good, was, you know, the idea is to take your shit out of the conversation. He's kind of, and it's perhaps just for me, because it's kind of a way of still inserting your shit back into the conversation. Because you're picking up all keywords that resonate with you
Yes.
and asking the person to explore that, whereas
Yes.
perhaps that might just be a form of distraction.
Potentially. Let's come back to that.
This lady here is getting really, really frustrated, Olaf. She's had her hand up for
I'm
ages.
sorry.
I've got a sore arm. I found the questions limiting.
Well, it's an exercise, and we gave you 2 to start with. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
What kind of limiting?
But, well, you see, that's exactly the question. I know this person quite well, so I have lots of questions to ask, but maybe if I didn't and the conversation was about astrophysics, then they would be great. But if you know somebody, the questions obviously will be
So great when you don't know the person or the topic.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think Matthew's got something to say on this subject, but he's being reluctant to step up to say it.
One thing I love about this is I was able to keep the person in their conversation and just keep it going. It's like, yeah.
I think you're kind of sharing a bit more of an experience, so you're going through the story together rather than just the person speaking. You're kind of interacting with them a little bit more than you were originally, so you're getting to know that person a bit better as well at the same time.
Getting to know them a bit better.
The ability to repeat back what they're saying means that we can't offer an opinion, whether we agree or disagree. But it also prompts that person to then, again, provide more detail and what they're saying. And actually, for somebody that I do know, it's almost more helpful because I might have knowledge on that person or that situation, but my purpose is to discover and understand a little bit more of what they're thinking, as opposed to try and then turn it into a discussion where it's a debate. I just need to get more detail from you, and actually just by repeating back to you, that really drives that focus.
And more of a question, have you ever tried the counter? So we talked about nodding to a person, you did a negative, and no, or and did something that was showing frustration.
Yes, I've tried that very, very often in my life.
Does it help with the conversation, or do you find it stops?
Well, it depends on what you find helpful. So I don't think it encourages an exchange as much as... And what I also had is I do encourage people quite a lot with nodding, etc. Many people think I agree, which I don't necessarily when I say, oh, interesting, interesting, interesting. They would go on and on about whatever. So my wife comes home from work and shares that traffic was like hell and every driver was an asshole, and I would like ask, oh, what kind of assholes are those assholes? And that doesn't mean I agree. But I do usually I try not to give negative feedback in like that, and it happens, of course. So back to aspiration.
I've got a question to Judy. Do you have any example of conversation where you tried these questions, and would you be able to repeat them for us and tell us what you actually learn more by asking that question from that person?
I've got so many. The question is which examples were most helpful. So the one I tend to quote is the one that's got the largest number in the middle of it, which is a business analyst in the Netherlands who reckoned that just one of these questions had saved his organisation, I think it was 3.7 billion euros. Because what he was working on was a merger between two banks, a Dutch bank and a Belgian bank. And the outline of the technical description of what needed to be done had already been written up. It was all there. It was all sorted. He was just running through a couple of quick case studies and just checking a few details. And at a certain point, his spidey sense caused him to ask, what kind of, about this jargon word which was being used. And it emerged that the Dutch side and the Belgian side meant something subtly different. And he reckons that the subtlety was such that, and his organisation was willing to go on the record, this case studies online in various places, that basically the subtlety was such that it probably, if he hadn't picked it up, it possibly wouldn't have been picked up until the delivery stage. It was a big old project, not agile. It was like one big delivery job. And yeah, so his organisation said that question was enough to save the day, save the whole thing. So that's my favourite example. But I'm using these questions at all sorts of scales. So I use them in my coaching work, and I'm using them to go deep with stuff. So people are talking about going deep and exploring some really profound stuff. Matthew, dig in.
An agile example, probably quite a few people do, but as a Scrum Master, I ain't the expert in the product. My product owner is. So I want to get good information out of him. So just standing there and going, well, is there anything else about feature X, and anything else, or what kind of feature is that? And drilling down gets high quality information out quickly, and in a way that other people can hear, and it doesn't put me in there. So just building up a story map. This stuff is fantastic as an agile example.
And it's not conflicting, right?
Yeah.
It's not antagonistic.
I'm just trying to draw more from the expert. There's the example. The other people know it.
I was talking.
How do I help them explain it to other people in the room? They know it so well. They can't explain it. But these questions help them unpack it and other people can understand it.
I was talking to a Scrum Master up in Bedford last night, and he was saying, similar to the lady in the stripy top, was saying that he uses the questions with his team when he doesn't understand. So to find out about the thing that they've mentioned that he's got no idea what they're talking about, absolutely, great. But where they add the real value is when he's asking about the thing that he thinks he knows what they're talking about. So, there's an example I often use. Can I use the flower? Have we got time to do the flower? Everybody think of a flower. A flower.
Flower.
Everybody think of a flower.
The plant flower, not the ingredient
Well, they can
flower.
think about the ingredient flower if they like, but what kind of flower is your flower?
Rose.
A rose. What kind of flower is your flower?
Rose.
Sorry, a rose? What kind of rose is your rose? A red one. And your rose?
Red.
Red. And what kind of red rose is your red rose?
It's sort of a bud. What you mean as in the name of it?
And what kind of rose is it?
It's just a half-closed red rose.
A half-closed red rose. And what kind of red rose is your red rose?
Open one.
An open one. And an open one and a half-closed one. So you get the general drift.
Yeah.
Even a simple word like flower, we think we all know what we mean by a flower. We think we all know what we mean by a rose. As soon as you get into the nitty-gritty, as soon as you ask a few questions, suddenly you start to discover that there are differences. And sometimes those differences will be important and sometimes they won't be important. But the point is that their experience is not your experience. And this has very profound consequences. Because it means that they are not the same as you. They're much more interesting than that. And when people get this, the penny drops, and they can spend their lives being curious about these strange creatures that surround them, that don't think the same as them. Sorry, I'm on one of my rants.
I need to write this down. This needs to be tweeted.
Feel free to use hashtag clean language.
Yes. Did we answer your question now?
Well, not really, because
You asked what if I want to understand what they are saying?
Yes, but I want to understand that we've got a common understanding, because they can be telling me lots of things and if I'm misinterpreting, they're
Yes.
going this way and I'm going that way.
Yeah.
If I just keep asking, then I'm not sure that we're ever going to come back.
So
Unless I can somehow summarise, allow you to say, this is what I think we're saying, or something like that.
well, if you can do that. So clean language is not about you can't do anything else anymore ever in your life. It's about becoming aware. Where do I put my stuff into this conversation, and where am I actually giving the other person the space? And separating this my shit, your shit, or my shit, everybody else's shit, or whatever it is that I want to be separating. We talked about that on the way here. These different clean things, so clean language, clean feedback, which we're going to do very, very soon, and also clean slate, which is part of the Temenos method that I use a lot. It's about separating what's going on in my mind and what's going on somewhere else. And I think deconflating that reduces a lot of potential conflict or actual conflict and gives you a lot of opportunities to have more clarity, and that will lead to more happiness and more health in the end. So sure, there are situations where you need to understand what somebody is saying and you want to make sure that you're understanding the same thing. And it's good to be aware that that's probably not always the case. Most cases, each of us will not understand what we are thinking. And that's where clean language helps, because if we get there, then the comparison becomes a lot more likely to be successful. To your point, if I ask such a question, there is something that I'm bringing into the conversation. Yes, it's focus. Clean language is extremely strongly focusing somebody's attention, and it's inviting them to do that. So they can say, no, there's nothing else about X. It's a rose. It's just a rose. Right? It's possible to kind of very gently back out of that question. Questions are extremely violent, by the way. When you ask somebody a question, there is no polite way to not answer. And clean questions are phrased in a way that there's always an answer that is polite and not giving you anything. And that's a way to kind of reduce this violence of questioning somebody. My take on this is, again, I want to be aware. So I've had a lot of coaching educations where somebody said, you can only ask open-ended questions. Bullshit. When I'm coaching, I want to make sure that everything I do, and this is about listening or talking, this is about asking a question, making a statement, being very gentle and kind, or being absolutely in their face. The purpose of everything I do is to increase your understanding. It's for your learning, for your purpose. If I'm going to say something, ask something, do something, or not do something that has the purpose of increasing anything for me, then I'm not coaching. When I'm coaching, my purpose is increasing your learning, your experience, your solution, whatever it is we're working on. And clean questions are very, very likely on that side of things. And yes, there is an aspect of me directing your attention by asking you what kind of, whatever you said. Important. So, separating different kinds of shit. Do you want to explain clean feedback? You may use different words.
Yes, shall we move on to the next chunk?
Because the chunk after the next chunk is going to be pizza, and we don't want to be late for that, right?
One more question before we move over to the next chunk.
Once you go to that level, to level 2, where we did, actually you have enough information to go into level 3, which is shift emotional state, which this is what I did with him.
Yes, you can use these questions to change emotional states. Those 6 things are not really levels, because there's all sorts of stuff within what we've already covered you can use for the other purposes on that list. But yes, where attention goes, energy flows. So if you ask these questions about the good stuff, you'll cheer people up. And if you ask the questions about the stuff that makes them unhappy, you'll make them more unhappy. Because you're directing their attention. It's like you've got a flashlight or a great big spotlight, and you're directing their attention to whatever it is you choose to direct their attention to. So this word clean, in clean language, is supposed to be an idea that you minimize content imposition from the facilitator, but actually directing attention is as imposing and as directing and as violent, I suppose is the word, as can be. But there is, with clean language questions, always a get out. It's always with the subject's permission. So these questions are not suitable for working, for example, with a hostile witness, with someone who doesn't want to share with you. Next bit then, or we shall be late for the pizza bit. And that would not do. So, let me just hit B and just clear the decks for a moment, because this is a slightly different piece of the clean tool set. And I said clean is a precision toolkit. The 2 Lazy Jedi questions are one part. Clean feedback is a different part, a different area. In a moment you'll notice what's similar and what's different. Clean feedback is a model which you can combine with your other feedback models. So most of you will have some structures for giving feedback. This model is probably one that you can combine with those. But it seems to add something to them. It seems to add a piece which enables people to get less emotional about feedback. So again, let's try it and then do the talking if that's okay. But there does need to be a bit of explanation. So this model was developed by our colleague Caitlin Walker, who's written a book called From Contempt to Curiosity, which I highly recommend. Possibly the second best book about clean language in the world.
She has written the other one. I think this one is better, to be very honest.
It is better, to be honest, it is. So this model, Caitlin says, you simply divide the evidence, so what you saw or heard, from the inference, the meaning that you made of that, and the impact, the effect it had on you or on the situation. So you literally spell out those steps. So for example, Olaf, when you turned to me and said, would you like to explain clean feedback? The meaning I made of that was, well, A, oh shit, and B, and B was that the meaning I made of that was that you, Olaf, were not ready to explain it. And the effect that had on the situation and on me was that I went, oh shit, and went into a big pause and went into a little decline of spiral of going, oh no, I don't know whether I can do this. And that was what happened. But let's try it a different way. So, Olaf, when you turned to me, and what I saw and heard was that you turned to me and said, would you like to explain clean feedback? The meaning I made from that was that we really were sharing this platform. We were doing this together, and you wanted to make sure that we both had enough airtime, enough space to do our talking. And the impact on me was to encourage me to think, right, how are we going to do this really, really excellently? The difference is in the meaning. So, working with the partner that you've been working with all evening, your task in a moment is to give them a piece of feedback using this model.
Sorry, Judy. If now isn't the time, can you, I didn't understand the example you gave there.
I give you another example. I give you another example.
Yeah.
Judy, when we started walking towards this place from whatever the station was, Blackfriars,
yeah.
And you started looking on your phone for the way, and you started telling me that you had picked a restaurant with really good veggie food halfway to the venue. The meaning I made from that was that you really care about me, and that you even had anticipated that my feet are currently not working well, and I can't really work very fast, very far at the moment, which is very unusual. And the impact that has was I felt welcome, I felt well cared for, and I was really looking forward to spending the rest of the evening together with you, knowing that you care for my experience. So thank you.
Thank you.
So share what happened as much as reality, as neutral reality as you can, and then meaning, what was the story you make in your head, and what's the impact.
So we won't be doing this bit to encourage you to swap over. As soon as you've finished doing your feedback, swap over and do it the other way. And when you're done, sort of give Olaf, you're going to need to go in again, if that's okay.
Sure.
Give me a wave and let me know you're done. And we'll pick up again. It shouldn't take as many as 4 minutes, I don't think. But feel free to take a moment to think about what you're going to say before you say it. What did you notice?
Clear structure helps you cope with more information than you would have if you didn't follow the structure.
So you come up with more information than you would have if you didn't follow the structure.
In a more structured way.
Mm-hmm. A more structured way.
Yeah, more focus. Yeah, more focus.
More focus. Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I'm annoyed at that, but the more we go into the evening, the more I understand that what really is important to us as human beings is the meaning, not the concept, but what it means to other people and to ourselves. The second part is what really creates the impact, not the evidence.
Yeah, the second part is what makes the impact,
Yeah.
not the evidence. Matthew, and then this lady.
In putting it in that way, I could hear their evidence, but I didn't have to take on their meaning. I could hear it, I could leave it over there with them. It's like, that's their meaning, it's not mine. I don't have to own that. So
Yeah.
it's quite liberating.
It's not their meaning.
And along the same lines, it also makes you question the meaning that you assigned to an action. So, for example, someone might, let's say, shout at you and you think they're angry at you, but by phrasing it this way, you see that it's your interpretation and not necessarily theirs.
It's your interpretation. Someone over there had something to say?
I could repeat like what we came up together. So it felt as a very non-aggressive way to share feedback, because the impact was like about my feelings, my impressions. So it wasn't pointing the stick of the feedback towards the other person.
Yeah.
It was, it made me feel that way.
Yeah.
Rather, you've done something wrong.
Yeah, so it wasn't pointing the stick to the other person, this made me feel. It's my thing.
So it kind of sucks the emotion out of it as well, because you're verbalising how it made you feel rather than manifesting it, I guess.
Yeah.
You could also put the emotions in, especially when you have something positive.
The lady in the white shirt has been trying to speak for a while.
One of the really interesting things is actually separating that evidence and inference out was the difference between what I heard and what was said. Even saying what I heard was this, is like, no, actually that was what I inferred. What I actually heard was that. So that level of discipline was actually really helpful.
The difference between what I heard and what was said.
Awesome.
Interesting. Teresa?
It was good to hear someone who is happy to listen what you were saying, and also to say to that person that you liked what he said. It's an exchange, it's a happiness of two people talking.
Yeah, it's an exchange.
So
this kind of feedback separates what happened from how it choose to feel about it. And there's less blaming in it, because in the end, whatever we feel is what we choose to feel.
Up to a point, but yeah.
I'd echo that. It felt comfortable because even if I was wrong or I misinterpreted or picked it up, I'd given the reasons of how I got to that point and how I come to that assumption. So it actually felt quite easy to give the feedback because there wasn't going to be a negative impact if I got it wrong.
Yeah, so it wasn't going to be a negative impact if you got it wrong. You explained how you got to it.
I could be easily corrected.
That's it, you can be easily corrected because you've stated your evidence and then the meaning is your meaning. And then often the impact comes from the meaning, not from the evidence. Now this thing has enormous impact where it's used. Now I'm not saying that this is as easy to do as just flying off the handle and saying what you think. It takes work. But when it's used well, it can be awesome. It's currently being used in a failing health service trust in the Midlands, where a bullying culture is absolutely rife across the organisation. And using this model, groups of clinicians and support staff are actually having the conversations that need to be had about what's happening and the effect it's having on the individuals and on the situation. And as a result of these conversations, things are changing to an extent that they will never be able to change back. Because once people start to speak in these kind of terms, once they talk about what I actually heard and saw, and then the meaning that I make of that, there's no going back. So Matthew will know, when I first saw this model, it had various complicated bells and whistles around it, and I thought, this is just I despair. But stripped to its essentials, it's a piece of genius.
So what we actually want is Caitlin and Judy? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
If I can add one thing, because I used this morning, okay? And the other thing that happens when you do this, especially with the impact bit, you are showing trust.
Mm-hmm.
So you're creating a link because you're giving something from yourself. The other human being is just obliged then to report it back.
So you're sharing yourself, so the other person is obliged. Fantastic, thank you. Lady over here.
When there was a conversation between like a very senior person and a junior person, you know, when the senior person gives the inference, this is what I think, isn't there still, you know, the difficulty that the junior person may think that senior person is right? So you've still got some obstacles to overcome, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah. One thing that's related to that, very, very often when we give evidence, there will still be a lot of interpretation in that. Like words always summarize, categorize. So when I say something like, when you keep interrupting me like that, or when you keep invading my personal space like that, or when you keep grabbing me like that, or whatever, might be something that is happening that you can't really put into words. You don't need to. You can say when this is happening, or when you are behaving like that, then the meaning I make and the impact it's having. So one trick is, especially when you want to give really difficult feedback on behavior that's not appropriate, for instance, or something that is like really out of line, and you don't want to name it because the naming would make it offensive already, then you can just say what just happened had this impact on me. I interpreted what just happened like this, and it had that impact. So that's a way to make this very hard bit. And I think what you said is extremely important. Like differences in rank and privilege are probably the most common cause of suffering that we have. Second to unconscious differences in rank and privilege that we don't acknowledge. This helps us to become a little more conscious of what's happening, and therefore it becomes a little better, easier to manage. And sure, when somebody's very senior and saying something, I will have a tendency to actually go with it first. But then I can say, okay, when I heard you say X, the inference I made was I need to follow that thought because it's the thought. And the impact that had is that we failed because whatever. Yeah. So you can actually connect this and get into a kind of incremental improvement. How many minutes do we have until pizza time? Like 5 minutes? So we do have time for a few questions. It doesn't smell cheesy yet.
Not yet. There is a closing piece about what difference does all of this make that we said we'd include. So.
She actually has a plan occasionally, which is really, really cool. Because I usually go without such things. Question and then plan.
It wasn't a question, actually a point I wanted to make about this as well. So, sometimes people do behave in certain way because they don't know actually what is impact going to be.
Yeah.
So I think if this model, basically interference and impact, can actually help them to realize that what they are doing is not actually acceptable. So, and it could be a kind of really good distractor within that.
Yeah.
I've seen that in many times people don't know what they're doing and what impact it is having on someone else.
Absolutely.
I have one similar to yours, that it changes this system, helps to change perceptions and assumptions.
Yeah.
About your set of views.
Yeah. Gentleman at the back.
Do you not feel that clean language is very similar to a question that a lot of other people pose in the sense of the 5 whys? And if you look at your last slide, it's almost like drilling down and asking 5 whys. It's just replacing the y with x to a degree. I don't know if you agree with that, but it's an interpretation that I think.
It can be used in a way like that. That's not its most useful application in my experience. So one of the things that we're not covering tonight, but we do in clean language is iterative questioning. So asking what kind of, and then take the answer to that, what kind of, take the answer to that, what kind of. We wouldn't normally do it 5 times, we'd normally do it 6 times, for reasons which are beyond the scope of this evening, but we would never stop at 5. We'd always do it 6 times, never 5. And
it's very similar to the 5-time one.
Yeah, David Grove has been heard to argue that if the 5 whys had been extended to the 6 whys, it might have worked.
I doubt it.
But yeah, the short answer is that that's one way to use clean language, but using it a much more opening and exploratory way will usually work more effectively. My husband has actually done a lot of consulting work using the 5 whys before we met, and now he obviously uses clean language in its place. He argues very strongly that he would never go back. I'll put you in touch if you like. Gentleman over there has a question.
Just a small point on that. Is a conversation with my 8-year-old yesterday, and I was going down that 5 whys, which is doing something I don't know what to do. Trying to, that wouldn't be what to do. I don't think that would have worked with an 8-year-old, whereas in feedback model, I think you would get instantaneously, because you care. The 5 whys, you sitting through that, and you just lost it. Whereas this is, I saw this, it meant this to me, this is the impact that it had. I think you would get it in moments, rather than me trying to rack my brain and pull out all of my managerial skills to work with an 8-year-old, which is always a good test of how good a manager.
With 8-year-olds, the Lazy Jedi questions can be brilliant. There's a book called Clean Language in the Classroom by Judy Mccracken, which explains, her classes have usually been 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and she used it in a whole bunch of different ways to really open up the classroom environment, open up the experience for them, help them to guide their classroom experience. At the beginning of the year, they use clean language to design the classroom that they need to work really well. and then through the year they're using clean language in a whole bunch of different situations, so it's ace for that. Any other general questions? One more.
How long has clean language been running for, and where did it start from?
David Grove devised it during the 80s through to his death in 2008.
Is it predominantly used in software delivery, or does it have a mechanism?
Its history is from psychotherapy. David Grove was a psychotherapist, and then it moved into coaching, and then various of us started to think, actually, this has got wider applications, much more interesting applications. So this is what I'm talking about. It's plasticity, it's flexibility, something that starts so far away and then has been quite widely now adopted by agilists around the world, because agile mindsets seem to sit really nicely with clean mindsets. The idea that people construct their own reality, the idea that people have the answers they need, the idea that people can be encouraged to say what's really true for them, all these kind of things sit well with both methodologies. I'm banging on again, sorry.
That's great. And I'm just admiring your definition of the word widely adopted, but I also see a lot of value in positivity.
Yeah.
So when all of this, what difference does that make for you?
I think it's really powerful, but it will take time and practice to actually start getting something from this.
It'll take time and practice.
Yeah, to be honest, this is my second session. You have been to SF once for lunch and learn.
Yes.
And I was part of that, and that is what is actually brought me here to learn more about it. And I'm keen on learning more.
Scott.
I think this creates far richer and deeper and more intriguing dialogue between people very, very quickly. So I think it's one of the fastest ways to get something maybe going between people, and that's valuable in lots of ways. I met Mary here just the first time. We had a great conversation on alternative, so we probably wouldn't have been like that had we not had clean language to talk about for 12 minutes or whatever we had.
Yeah, I'm never going to be short of having a conversation in the lift again.
I work in a company and I'll be dealing with people that I've dealt with before when I haven't used clean language. Do you have any tips? So, do you say I'm going to try a different technique? Because if I just went in and didn't say anything, 2 minutes, I think they would say, are you okay? So are there any tips with introducing this when you're dealing with people that you've dealt with before?
When I start a training, a thing that I often do is that I let people reflect on the question, when you're learning at your best, you're like what? And let them work in pairs and give the other the 2 lazy Jedi question, so that they can explore what the person is answering with what kind of, and is there anything else? So people think about learning, and they start practicing this. And after 5 minutes, the feedback I get is, I've never had such a respectful conversation. This is awesome, I want to learn more. And now I can participate in a training while I'm actually aware of how am I learning well. So it's a 5-minute time investment that gives people a taste of clean language in contrast to this 1 hour. That is usually quite, hooking. And I learned that from Judy. I didn't make that up.
Just try the lazy Jedi question. You don't stay silent. Just try those. See if it makes a difference.
And try using 1 lazy Jedi question this evening. Not in some special conversation, but just try 1 question in some context this evening, and then try 1 tomorrow, and 1 the next day, and then maybe 2 this time next week, and notice what happens.
And responding to this, I also have found that it's possible just to give a very, very quick introduction to this and say, this is something I use and I think it's very powerful. So if I ask you questions that sound a little weird, that's what I'm doing, and I'm happy to explain. And that's usually more than enough. So, and I'm thinking in a business context. If you don't have time to take people through an exercise or whatever, I'm going to ask you some questions. Might sound a little weird, but there's a good reason that it's about this, and bear with me. Never had a problem with that.
I think the question was more so how you make context. So if you're introducing this for the first time to a team who aren't aware of it, and obviously based on the fact that it's a new concept, how do you actually open conversations so other people engage and interact? Not so much something you may have alluded to now. So I think that's where the difference is. It's how you get a team to engage in, listening and actually identifying with evidence, influence and impact as well. So how do you get them to go from start to finish? Because a lot of people that you might actually speak to have a different mindset and might not actually respond to this way of thinking.
I think they will respond when you lead by example. So both clean feedback and the Lady Jedi questions, in my experience, are perfectly acceptable to just use. I know I'm a little weirder in my appearance and nature than Scott, so maybe I need less of an explanation for doing weird things, I don't know. But I just use this stuff. And people come and say, oh, you're giving feedback in an interesting way, and then I can explain it.
Okay, so I think the question was more so, if tomorrow we went to work and we wanted to actually use this in business, how do you actually use it? How do you set the scene?
Use your mouth and your tongue.
away from being condescending or just, light tone. Let's take it back. If nobody is aware of the principles that you're trying to reflect, how do you actually introduce this?
You don't. If the principles don't work, then something else is wrong. So if you give honest, clean feedback to people and they don't notice the difference, then there's something wrong with their brains. But if you improve your, if you show up differently at work and you give feedback in a different way, or you ask questions in this curious way, at some point somebody's going to ask you, what are you doing? I noticed there's a difference in your conversation compared to yesterday.
Which one of the exercises do you think works well to introduce this to a new business?
Olaf's just described one good exercise, but the one, while it's wider than just clean language, the one that is most widely used worldwide is 2-minute listening. That comes from various other methodologies. I learned it from Nancy Klein. But that just sit down and listen to your colleague for 2 minutes, talk about something important to them, and do not interrupt. And then they will do the same for you. If you were to introduce that as a practice within your organisation, it would make a difference. Having done that, then you can take them to the next level, and then to the next level, and the next level. So a step-by-step process. But just inviting people in a group to spend 2 minutes listening to each other will make a huge difference. And we are starting to run out of time, so one last comment.
I was just going to say, I think the beauty of this, from a working practice, is that the fundamentals is that it actually puts, it empowers people to feel like they can contribute to discussions a whole lot more. And I'm responsible for training and development. And for me, I'm a big fan of the start with why principle. And I think if your teams are used to working in a certain way, but taking a few moments to explain that actually what we'd like to do is find a way that we can invite their opinion, and that's how we set it up. I think it's only ever going to be seen by them as something that allows them to talk more. And I think it's giving them the option that when they want to use this, there's a way that they can, because not everybody's going to come forward with a whole bunch of stuff straight away. I don't think there's any harm in positioning this as part of a big vision that says, we believe that you've got a lot of what you need already, and we want to help you find a way to tap into that.
And of course, another thing you could do if you want to introduce this to an organisation and you've got any strings that you can pull, I'm very happy to come in and help. Meanwhile,
that's the cue to our small advertisement at the end. There are a few options to meet us next in London. starting from bottom to top, Judy is doing a clean language and agenda shift course with Mike Burris in September. She and I are doing a clean language for agile adventurers course in November. In early September, I am doing a Trust Temenos Certified Agile Leadership course in London. I currently do not have an excuse to come to London in October. So you're absolutely welcome to create one. This is a year where I don't know why that happened, but since March, every month there's something in my calendar bringing me here. I really like that. So if you find more reasons for me to come, I'm happily coming back. Any other questions? Things we need to share?
There is one other thing we need to share, that said, thank you very much to Adventures with Agile for setting up the event.
Yes. Where's Mika?
He's over there doing the pizza.
Oh.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for speaking. Thank you very much to Dan for doing the filming. Cameraman Dan is available for filming all kinds of events like this and putting your organisation on YouTube. And thank you very much for LexisNexis for the event space.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have pizza.